How is everybody doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Sorry I've been off for a couple of days, everybody. I was a little under the weather there for a few days, but I wanted to get back to it here. Really big episode that I wanted to bring out a couple of days ago, but like I said, a little under the weather. But I wanted to talk about the GDP numbers that came out last week for the second quarter. I looked at these numbers. I alluded to this on the live stream from last Friday. So that would have been the live stream as of 9/27. And, I talked about how there was an article from Zero Hedge that I wanted to bring in. I wanted to talk about, and I'll just bring that up now. And because I saw this, 3% GDP number, and I was like, there's no way that we went from an anemic 1.3, 1.4%, and just where everything was at with the economy, that we jumped from those kind of anemic GDP numbers to magically came in at 3% GDP. So, and this article here, of course, had our answer. So let's dip into this here. So this is Zero Hedge, and this is called Mystery of Upward GDP Revision Solved. You are all 500 billion richer now, according to a revised Biden admin spreadsheet. So the article starts off by saying something strange happened yesterday when the Bureau of Economic Analysis released the final estimate of second quarter GDP data. As part of the release, Biden's Department of Commerce, run by Gina Raimondo, we all know her because which also runs the BEA, reported the GDP since 2020 had been revised markedly higher, with the exception of H2 2023. And then we could see the chart here, original GDP and in the green or bluish, and then GDP revised. So we could see that the revised GDP, going up here, particularly over the last few quarters. Here's the bar line. Is it basically 2% right here? And then we got 4%. So it's almost comical that we had GDP over 4% or whatever. I mean, this is basically all government spending. This is not the consumers out there buying everything up, even though banks such as Goldman Sachs warned of expectedly and significantly negative revision to historical GDP numbers. And we have some charts here from Goldman Sachs, basically estimated revisions of key GDP data sources right here, 2023 second quarter through 2024 second quarter. And then over here, we got contributions of estimated revisions to GDP. So they're based. So Goldman Sachs is coming out basically saying that, hey, the previous GDP numbers are going to be revised significantly lower. But then we got the actual revision, they were revised significantly upward. So what happened? Recall that about a year ago, questions started to swirl around the record divergence between gross domestic product, GDP, and gross domestic income, GDI, which, unlike GDP, also captures various interest payments, mostly to and from the Federal Reserve. And you can see here from this chart, if we look to the far right here, the orange line being the GDP and the blue line being the GDI. And you obviously 0% would be, zero here on the bar line. So we had negative GDI and we had positive GDP. And there obviously you could see the large gap that was basically breaking between the two. So now, ironically, back in September of 2023, JP Morgan expected that GDP would catch down to GDI, resulting in much weaker GDP print. That did not happen because the Biden administration came up with a last-minute stick save that revised historical data to make it seem the U.S. was stronger than previously thought. Fast forward to this week when Goldman was looking at the same gap and also at the divergence between various GDP components as reported and their revisions, and also expected that historical GDP would be revised much lower, also catching down again to GDI, meaning that this number right here, if we look at the chart here, meaning that this GDP number was going to come down and match this GDI in negative territory. But again, that did not happen. That too did not happen because the Biden admin, pretty much did the same thing again. So, and what did happen is that not only was GDI revised sharply higher, effectively closing the record divergence between the two series by boosting various interest income assumptions of GDI. So here we can see the chart here, and you can see the line going down where it says basically back to normal, or it's basically, cutting back down there. Quite the revision there back to normal, I would say, back up over zero and back up to normal. So, but there's more. After the release of today's personal income and spending data, we found just why Goldman was so wrong in its assumption that U.S. GDP should be revised lower based on historical data. The reason for Goldman's erroneous forecast and the unexpected boost in U.S. economic growth is because Department of Commerce head Gina Raimondo, the same person who 1 month ago told ABC that she was unfamiliar with the Bureau of Labor, which had just slashed historical U.S. jobs by over 800,000. And one of the most political operatives of the Biden administration decided to drastically revise the two most important data sets propping up the U.S. economy: personal income and personal spending. Now, Gina, our girl Gina here, she's not familiar with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and apparently never heard of that, which is just, mind-boggling. But then she came out this week and she was asked about the big worker strike that's going on right now. And she basically was just totally oblivious to that too. Oh, I have no idea. I never, everybody and their mother has heard of this worker strike. People that don't know, that didn't even know dock workers existed, heard of this strike. It just, yes, Gina. Yeah, I can't even what to say that. So anyway. All right, first, as shown in the chart below, personal income was unexpectedly revised about $800 billion higher as a result of not just an increase in what the government believes was interest and dividend income, but also government handouts, i.e. personal current transfer receipts rising over $200 billion, and also a $293 billion cumulative increase in wages and salaries. In total, disposable personal income was revised from just under 21 trillion, and that's annualized number, to 21.8 trillion. So you can see here from the chart, here is the disposable personal income original series, which is the red dotted line, and then the black hard line is the disposable personal income revised series. So you can see how it was just revised up, but as it starts to go up, you see more of a much larger gap there at the top. But you see here how the revision begins, and it begins to just move right on up. So spending was also revised higher, if to a lesser extent. The August number for personal outlays was revised higher by about $350 billion, from 20.38 trillion in July to 20.37 trillion in the revised data, reflecting a reduction in spending on goods offset by a much higher increase in spending on services. And then we see the same outline here. Again, the solid black line is the revised personal spending. The red line is the original number there. So not as pronounced as the chart up here, but still, again, you can see the revision. So to summarize, disposable personal income after tax was revised 3.8% higher to 21.8 trillion, while personal spending was revised higher by about half that, or 1.7%, to 20.7 trillion. And since the difference between how much you make and how much you spend is also called savings, we can finally get to the bottom of how the U.S. economy magically grew in the past several years instead of shrinking more. It turns out that when some bureaucrat in Gina Raimondo's Bureau of Economic Analysis decided to click on a mouse button in recent weeks, perhaps in response to the dramatic plunge in revised jobs, Americans suddenly became much wealthier, if only in some Department of Commerce spreadsheet. You see, when subtracting the revised personal spend from the revised personal income, what you get is the revised savings of U.S. consumers, which as of today's DUEX revision has almost doubled, rising from $600 billion in July to $1.1 trillion in August. It's like magic. Yes, dear Americans, rejoice, for a spreadsheet revision means you are all now $500 billion richer. So here you can see personal savings, original and revised, right here. So you can see how much the savings rate, it spiked up with all the COVID funds, and then basically has plunged back down as all those funds have been spent. But the revised number here, you can see tracking upwards, whereas the red number, again, tracking downwards. Finally, we can also calculate the revised personal savings rate, which looks like this. So so this is quite the number here. So here's the original, and here's the revised down here. So and you can see how big of a gap that, I mean, look at that. Look at that spike up in the top chart here, top part of this chart. I mean, look at that spike up and then come over. It's just unbelievable. So what this chart shows is remarkable. So instead of dropping to a near record low where it was according to the previously revised income spending data just last month, all it took was one assumption about the trajectory of income spending and savings in the post-COVID era to make it seem that U.S. consumers are much healthier than they appeared just last month. So why does this matter? Because alongside record credit card balances and various Federal Reserve estimates that all the COVID excess savings had already been spent, the plunge in personal savings to a new record low was the straw that many economists saw would finally break the U.S. consumers back. So now we have a great chart here, basically personal savings versus credit cards. So you can see the credit card debt spiked to an all-time high. I think it's cruising around 1.5 trillion or so. What is it? Probably about one. Yeah, this has got about 1.4 trillion. And then it's got the savings rate down here at about 2.9% there. It's just, it's crazy. And from there, the path to a self-reinforcing consumer-driven recession narrative was just a breath away. However, now that a perfectly timed and very strategic data revision has come in just in time to drown out the rapidly revised recession narrative, we can pretend, if only for a few months until the election, the U.S. consumer and households are actually quite healthy, even if said healthy is totally fabricated in the result of a mouse click and nothing else. So, and it goes on to say, and it just so happened that something was the one number that is the most easy to fudge and manipulate, a number which bears zero correspondence to reality, even though it may well be the most important number for U.S. consumers, the personal savings number, arbitrarily construed by BEA bean counters, and which in no way reflects the amount of actual savings in the bank. What it does, however, reflect is that we are about to hear a whole lot of BS by Kamala Harris's puppet masters, how the U.S. consumer has rarely been strong, has rarely been stronger, and how U.S. personal savings, instead of being on a record low, are actually the highest in 3 years. So I think this really gets back to the point of, this article gets back to the point of, it's like, what is going on with our government? And I've said this so many times before, and that is, businesses, we have to make decisions based on this data. If you think that the GDP is growing and that the job market is great, the problem is they can massage and adjust and manipulate all these numbers all they want. It doesn't pass the eyeball test. When I get up and when you get up and we go to work every day and we look around, we talk to the other local business owners, we look at the local paper, you see like who's laying off, who's hiring, whatever, it doesn't pass the eyeball test. It doesn't pass the sniff test. And it's just so troubling because, what I have experienced over the last year is that people have this dichotomy where they're like, well, I don't understand. Like, I'm feeling this, but all these economic numbers are coming out saying this. And my point for the last year has been that these economic numbers are being dramatically fudged with. I mean, everything from the labor market to the GDP to what the Treasury has been doing with what Nouriel Roubini dubbed as ATI, activist Treasury issuance. There's just so much manipulation going on by this administration in the economic data numbers right now that it's just really hard. I mean, how do you make decisions on this? I mean, it's really disconcerting. It's really troubling. And, I don't know. it just I get really frustrated with this. And then and then the numbers and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times on CNBC, on Bloomberg will be, hey, everything's hunky-dory, everything's good, nothing to worry about. Look at how great the GDP's at 3%, unemployment's at 4%, everything's fine. What's it going, what's it worth, what's all the hubbub about? Recession is, it's nothing's happening, everything's fine. So, but I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I am a believer that the check always comes due. The check always comes due, and someday you got to pay the piper, and that day is going to come, and it's not going to be a pleasant day. And mark my words, you're going to see the people on CNBC, you'll see the people on Bloomberg, you'll see the people on Fox Business, and they'll all be parroting the same nonsense. Who could have seen this coming? Who could have seen this coming? Everything looked great. No one could have seen this coming. Yeah. Okay. All right. I've seen this play before. It was called the dot-com bubble bursting. It was called the '07 recession. It's like, yeah, we saw it. People saw it coming. You just didn't want, the media just didn't want to acknowledge it or didn't want to listen. So, but anyway, all right. That's my rant today, guys. That's my soapbox. So please make sure to check out the live stream. Will be tomorrow night, Friday, October 4th. Friday, October 4th, 7 p.m. live on YouTube. Make sure to check that out. If you like this video, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps the channel. Remember, we are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please make sure to leave your comments down below. I will have a whole bunch of new episodes coming out this weekend and all through next week. So make sure to check those out. Some really good interviews and other things coming up. So, but like I said, check out the live stream tomorrow night, and I will see everybody again real soon. Thanks a lot, guys.